right, greetings everybody. Robin here from Courage is the Cure. Welcome to episode 17 of Rise. This morning we're going to be joined by Phil Scott. He's a candidate for the upcoming WA state election.
Strength of a woman world on her shoulders. Fight through the north when the world gets colder. 832, got the grit, got the fire. Watch her rise, watch her come higher.
All right, greetings, welcome. Like I said, 3rd of March 2025, episode 17 of my new series within a series, because we do have the state election here in WA fast approaching. Voting day will be the 8th of March, so we don't have too long to go. As I said, we will be joined by Phil Scott, candidate for One Nation. Let me add Phil to the stage. Good morning, Phil. How are you?
Good morning, Robin. I like the intro. That's the only intro. You haven't graduated to Batwoman from Robin yet.
No.
Like Robin, Roger Cook. I thought you might have morphed.
No. Oh, that's funny.
Bat person even.
Oh, that's right. It should be Bat Person now. Yes, you're quite right. Quite right. Not Batman. Phil, as I mentioned to everybody in the intro, you are running as a candidate for One Nation in the upcoming WA state election. You're number 2 on Pauline Hanson's One Nation's WA Legislative Council ticket. That's a mouthful when you string it all together like that. I had a little bit of a poke around on your website, and people can go along. Yeah, the address is at the bottom there. If people want to do
that.
So you're a father of. Yeah, well, journalist is a dirty word now. They can't do their job properly. So you're a father of 6 children, worked in insurance, market research and logistics. Do you want to introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, well, obviously I'm an Australian trapped in an English body. I came here 34 years ago and I've had 6 children. I mean, it's been a real blessing. It's been a struggle at times. So I identify with what many families go through with cost of living and rental crisis. In fact, a couple of my children moved back in and one's had a baby. So I've got a very vibrant household at the moment. And yeah, I've worked in different fields, insurance underwriting, logistics, retail, market research. So I've not been a career politician with one party, but I've always had an interest in politics. Because even if you're not engaged with politics, those decisions affect your day-to-day life. And when I was at university in England, I noticed that the students studying took a backward step and the people who were activists took over the student guild. So you have people pushing narratives against the wishes of the majority because of pure apathy. And it's the same in Australian politics. If the government of the day can distract you with bread and circuses, whether it's sports matches or some kind of entertainment, they can distract you from the real issues. And I just feel that people are in a frog in the water. The water's getting warmer. And we're losing our freedom, we're losing our heritage. And I'll work with anybody who stands for freedom. Freedom is at the core of why I stand in politics, because you have to have choice in life. You make the choices. You're a human. You're not a chattel of the corporations. And you choose the journey you wish to make.
We often ask this question with people that I speak to outside of this election cycle in Western Australia, but the other guests that I have, particularly on my show Relentless, where I get to spend a lot of time talking in detail about whatever field they're relentless in, we often ask each other, what is freedom? So you just mentioned there that word. What does freedom mean to you?
Well, freedom is your right to choose your belief system, your religion, whether you believe or not. It's freedom to choose what type of medical treatment you receive without being compelled to take a certain route. I lost my job during the lockdowns, and I remember the owner of the business saying to me, "Look, Phil, just do it. Sometimes you have to do things." And he's a great guy. I said, "Look, I don't have to do anything that I don't want to do. But this is why my father and forefathers fought in world wars, so that we could have freedom to choose." And once you start taking that slippery slide of loss of freedoms, it ends up in a very unpleasant place where you have a surveillance society like you have in China, no cash, digital control. If you're an enemy of the state, you know, they've got you on record, they can close down your bank account. And that's the dystopian world we're heading to. And that's why I'm standing up to fight against that, because we'll just be like battery hens in a cage. We won't be free to be the people we want to be.
100%. I've just noticed you've got an interesting sticker there on Pauline's shoulder there behind you.
Take you to notice that. No, she's doing that free advertising for you. She normally charges people for gin and stuff, so you're very privileged, Robin.
That's fantastic. For anybody that's wondering what that is, that's Courage is the Cure 832 sticker. That's great. People can send me an email, courageisthecure@yahoo.com if they want a sticker. But that's fantastic, Phil. Particularly with my audience, just being able to hear you define for yourself what freedom means, and to hear that you lost your job during the mandates. I know a lot of people, the audience, can identify with that. You mentioned a bit of your previous work history there. How do you think that places you in a good position as a candidate for One Nation, and how will that aid you if you're elected after the 8th of March?
Well, having worked in retail for different post office franchisees, I know how the government screws little business. You know, a lot of these small post offices are running on very small profit margins, while the CEOs get massive amounts of money, as do the executive management team. And this was a point I brought up with Pauline in 2017 when she came across. I said, you know, the CEO of Australia Post, which is a semi-government corporation, is refusing to reveal his rewards, his benefits that he's getting, and his incentives. And this should be public knowledge. And she took up the mantle. And within a few weeks, can't remember his name, I think it's Ahmed, had moved on from his job and accused Pauline of being just a small-time fish and chip lady. But he was embarrassed, he was called out. And this still happens in Australia Post. We've got management on six-figure salaries saying, you know, the mail service isn't profitable anymore. And you've got this top-heavy management, which is totally unnecessary. Now, when Christine Holgate was the CEO of Australia Post, Scott Morrison made a big deal out of the watch scandal. But that was the tip of the iceberg, because some of those executives were given bonuses to stay on of $200,000. Christine Holgate was made the enemy because she wanted the post office in the rural areas to be regional banks. And the big four banks didn't like this because she was raining on their parade. So basically, Scott Morrison did a number on her. I've gone off track there with a question. I do that quite often as a boomer, but I don't do a Joe Biden. Going back to market research, I know how surveys can be framed, questions can be framed to give an impression that the public thinks a certain way. For example, on the political polls, there's a section called Other. So it's not Labour, Liberal, Green, there's an Other section. So you don't really get a true reflection of the breakdown of the minor parties' votes, whether it's One Nation, Libertarians, or whatever. So there's a perception that they aren't involved in the game, they're just non-players. And market research is can be used as a psychological weapon, as it was used during COVID. You know, we saw people demonized for not doing the right thing and taking the vaccine. So marketing is very significant because messaging does influence people. And unfortunately, most people don't have the time to run through the detail of politics. So we get slogans like stop the boats, this, that. And it comes down to media sound bites, which are very short and don't always explain the whole issue.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I've been looking at Labor's short form videos, and they like to have the 1 second clips of images which purport to the public that they care about children and women and all these sorts of things. But again, as you've mentioned, it's all about marketing. It's all about capturing those sound bites and having the audio that captures people's attention. Not a fan. It kind of reminds me of corporate media. Not a fan of it. But, there's a lot of parties out there, minor parties, in particular this election cycle in WA. There's a couple that have started to gain some momentum. Why did you choose Pauline Hanson's One Nation Party?
Yes, well, back in 2016, the party was being re-established in West Australia. We'd had the terrorist atrocities overseas. I was concerned that this country was going to go the same way as the United Kingdom, that we'd lose our identity, that we'd lose the freedoms that people value. And in fact, one of the very interesting things I've found on this campaign trail is I've spoken to people from India, from Iran, and Malaysia, and there's a common pattern. They say we came to Australia because it was a safe place. It was a haven, and we'd hate to see it becoming the place we escaped from. And this applies to whoever I talk to, whether they're Muslim, Baha'i, Christian, whatever. Australia is to be a safe haven, and it's got to stay this way. So that's why I joined One Nation, partly in 2016. The other reason was because I do believe in putting Australian sovereignty and national interests first and foremost, before the United Nations, before global interests. And I felt that Pauline was always giving that message out, even if it was in very simple terms and people made fun of her. She was like the grandmother, the mother at that stage, but the grandmother now of the nation. She was saying, let's look after our food security. Let's look after our farmers. Let's ensure we've got quality water. Let's have water security. Let's have fuel security. Let's not destroy ourselves by destroying our manufacturing. We need to be a resilient nation. And let's face it, we are a very wealthy nation. And when you compare us with Kuwait and Norway, they have sovereign funds. They reinvest in their citizens. They make sure they've got quality health care. And it feels like we've been just plundered by overseas interests. And Liberal and Labour are just two sides of the same coin. And there needs to be a fresh face coming through to call these people to account so that people live and benefit from the common wealth. And that's the key word, the commonwealth. And that wealth shall be filtering down to remote Aboriginal communities. We shouldn't have over 120,000 people homeless on the streets. It's blight on our nation. And the measure of a society is how you do look after the poor and disadvantaged. And there's enough in this country for everybody.
We've had, I'll just ask you this one now, because you've mentioned, speaking to people coming to Australia because it's a safe haven. Over the past couple of hours, really, past couple of days with Donald Trump and Zelensky. We've then had European leaders meeting. We've had Albanese, our Prime Minister here, putting his 2 cents worth in. Canada commented that, I think, if I'm not mistaken, Trudeau just admitted that they've given Ukraine $20 billion. And Australia has certainly made its fair share of support monetarily. You've just mentioned, the measure of a country is how we look after the disenfranchised. What are your thoughts about the amount of money that has been sent over to Ukraine?
I think it's obscene. I mean, I don't want to stray into federal politics,
Mhm.
but if you remember what Eisenhower said after the Second World War, he said, watch out for the military complex. They're there to make money from war. A war's a great way of making money. As the merits of the war, I don't think either side comes out well, but I think Australia's sticking its neck in wars that none of our business, quite frankly. And the media just whip it up as well.
Yes, I think the next few days should be very interesting, and I would like to see the two parties of the same bum being questioned on things like this. While I was having a look at your webpage, people can go along to wa.onenation.org.au. There's a few things there that you talk about in your bio and the things that are of concern and focus to you. The standard of living for people, I mean, we've just touched on money there being sent overseas, particularly in Western Australia. How is it that you can see yourself being able to discuss, debate on people's behalf and the influence you might be able to have on the standard of living in WA?
Look, One Nation aren't going to form the state government, but we can have a strong presence in the upper house. I believe we're on course to have 3 members at the moment on the polling I'm seeing. And if we can collaborate with like-minded parties, whether it's the Christians or Libertarians or the Shooters and Fishers, we can form a voting bloc in the upper house to counteract any measures that a re-elected Cook government might propose that would be to the detriment of this state, where it's Aboriginal Heritage Act preventing development on farmers' lands. We're all for respecting Aboriginal rock and heritage, but we can't have a situation where there's uncertainty. People need certainty in life. We need reliable energy. We need to know that the lights are going to be on and that the power is affordable. So we can be a restraining influence in the upper house, as it were, and keep them to account.
Just for people that haven't been watching my series with all the candidates I've been interviewing, can you just let everybody know the importance of forming that voting bloc in the upper house? Can you talk to people about that?
Oh, it's huge. With the new McGowan electoral reforms, a minor party needs 2.6% to get one person elected. So there's every possibility that the Greens will get 5 members elected. So it's important that there's a balancing act, because as much as I like the environment, I don't want to see the Greens holding sway over the Labour Party and dictating the terms of government. Now, when you vote in the upper house, you can vote above the line. There's no group ticketing anymore, which means the party allocates your preferences. So the influence of the preference whisperer is being hammered, thank goodness. And you can just vote 6 boxes above the line and leave out Labour and Greens or whoever you want to leave out. You could just put all 6 minor parties or whatever. You vote below the line, which only about 5% of people do. You can vote a minimum of 20 numbers and just mix and match like the lollies at Woolies and pick the names you like. And that's valid, and I've done that myself in past elections.
Mm-hmm.
It just means more work for the WAC now.
Yeah. You were talking a little bit there about property rights, and often the Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Act comes out, and what a dog's breakfast that was. I don't know if you're aware of the gentleman in 2J that was taken to court because he'd built a bridge across a creek, if you like, or river, depends on who you talk to, that goes through his property. And during the time when that act was live, this gentleman found himself in trouble, and he's just come out of court a week and a half ago, if I'm not mistaken, and was fined for doing that. So what are your thoughts about that? Because as we saw, it was very quickly, the Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Act was very quickly attacked, I guess, or called, an insufficient act. And I can't help but think that's because it confused people, because let's not forget, people were voting on The Voice at the time. I'm not sure whether or not it's actually because the act was an actual dog's breakfast. What are your thoughts about property rights here? And we have people who are just, trying to make accessing their own property easier, finding themselves in court.
Well, yes, it just shows that the title to your land is under threat. And One Nation, we believe there should be a survey that earmarks all potential Aboriginal sacred sites, so that certainty we don't have a fluid woggle going through the state. So if we've got certainty, we've got the actual Aboriginal sites mapped out, whether it's rock art or whatever, we can respect that and work with Indigenous landowners. But if it's up for grabs and uncertain, then that's not a good thing.
We've got, you mentioned before we went live, the influence of property developers. We do have Ivana here making a good point. Can you highlight the unused apartments and housing built in the COVID days that are still vacant to this day, costing millions? I've seen whole apartment blocks in Perth that are boarded up, estates, not estates, what would you call them? Villas that are empty. When we have a housing crisis, I don't know if you can talk to Ivana's comment there, and also your thoughts about the influence of property developers.
Well, we know that when the electoral reforms from the McGowan government were passed, John Quigley was asked whether donations from property developers would be banned, as they are in the eastern states, and he said, no, it's not a problem here. Well, I beg to differ. When you look at people like Sudley donating to both sides of politics, and then you see people up in the hills, Save the Hills, trying to save the land around them. You see the people down at Margaret River, and now we've got this situation near the Canning Bridge where Labor are trying to obfuscate. There's a proposal for 36-storey skyline down there. And they've tabled that motion at the council till after the election, but it will be rubber stamped by the state government because the property developers give them massive donations. So we see local councils being eroded in what they can do by state government. This started under Colin Barnett with increased powers to override for the large-scale developments. So we want to see power return to local communities, local councils having real power. As for the vacant housing, well, there should be some sort of law that requires occupation within a certain period. It's like the vacant shops you see in Fremantle. There's got to be some way of incentivizing people to occupy the premises, or they get taxed or some sort of penalty, because it's just ridiculous. I mean, we have that centre at Bullsbrook still lying mothballed and vacant. I'm not sure what the plans are there, but I'm sure that that could house a lot of people. And then you get the state government attacking people who try to do the right thing, like Peter Lyndon James at Shalom House. I had the privilege of going there 2 weeks ago, and I knew he was doing a good job, but I didn't know the extent of it. I was absolutely blown away by the man's tenacity and determination over many obstacles and many years, and getting real results with people's lives, and yet they want to regulate this. Now, Reagan said the 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, "We're from the government and we're here to help." And that's so true, because when the government sticks its fingers in, things go, well, they're not as efficient. You know, a bureaucrat can make a mistake and you and I pay the penalty. In private enterprise, you lose your job. Going back to Ivana's question, though, I believe if there was a real determination to address the housing issue, it could be done. I mean, during the Second World War, they built a house in a day in Mount Hawthorne. But what we've had here is $1 million announced in funding, and just a few units and houses developed over a period of time. So it's really just lip service. There's got to be some rugged determination to cut through the red tape and get things done. And I think local councils, if they want to do something useful, they could do what they used to do in the UK and get involved in that social housing themselves. They've got vast reserves. Some councils have got millions in reserves. They've got CEOs who are on $250,000 a year. I just think we're over-governed to a massive extent in this country, and the people need to be unshackled to be the people they can be.
Just you mentioned Save Perth Hills and property developer Satterley. I live in the Perth Hills, so I'm well aware of Save Perth Hills, who have been campaigning for decades, if I'm not mistaken, to protect the hills from developers such as Satterley. And my understanding of the latest campaign for a particular area in Stoneville, had the support of council, and essentially what happened was that the state government didn't take into account, the council didn't take into account the group Save Perth Hills and the huge support that they have from the people who live in the hills. And despite that, the state government had granted Satterley to go ahead. And, we've had volunteer bushfire people give deputations against this new area that wants to be developed, because it's extremely dangerous with the roads, the lack of exits for the amount of people and cars that are going to be in that area. How do we, I don't know if you have the answer to this question, how do we have councils be able to be more powerful? Because I've been watching the councils for quite a while now, and there seems to be a dismantling of democracy directly through our councils and the lack of power that they have. How do you see giving that back, or establishing it as it should be with the councils?
Well, you need to roll back the power and the influence of the state administrative tribunals and the higher levels of government. And we need to restore councils to being what they were originally, local community volunteers. And now, when they introduced the tax-free allowance for councillors about 25 years ago, I think it's about 40,000 a councillor. It varies from council to council. It then became a little incentive for budding state politicians to throw their hand into the ring or push certain agendas. The Greens targeted local councils big time. And yeah, I'd just like to see councils going back to unpaid volunteers rather than being an incubator for would-be state politicians. We've had this situation in Mandurah where we've got Rhys Williams, I think his name is, the mayor. He's now standing for Labour. And the local community have been totally ignored over the brewery development there.
Yep.
So it seems like we're destroying the beautiful environment that Perth has, whether it's Margaret River, Mandurah, the Swan Hills. And that's why people come here. And we don't want to be like every other country. We need to be getting out of Perth. We need to be developing the regional centres. That's where we can start putting the money and building infrastructure like rail to connect country towns. But yeah, we need to look closely at local government and the influence of property developers.
Yeah. Yes, it would seem also in my council we've got a couple of people that are running for the Labor Party at the moment. You know, this is my conspiracy allegedly, but I can't help but think, particularly with those two parties that belong to the same bum, I feel there's some sort of compromise on their service to the council and the people that live within the council that elected them in the first place for that seat. Yeah, but that's just my.
The problem is people vote for councils not knowing the political affiliation of the people they're voting. That should be declared like it is in the UK. And we need maybe to have compulsory voting again. Not again. I mean, we need maybe we do need to have that in council elections. And yeah,
I think so. When I had a look at Port Macquarie Council in the Eastern States for another story on dismantling of democracy, on each person's bio on the council site, you can see they say which party they're affiliated with, or where they stand politically, which I think is very useful. I've never seen that in any of the WA councils that I've looked up, that's for sure. So yeah. A couple of the other things was young people and youth. You have concerns about education and the mental health crisis. Would you like to talk about those two issues?
Well, I'm glad I grew up before the internet. I really am. And now I think the Labor government are compounding the problems with this gender fluidity and the ability to change the name on the birth papers, and teaching little kids that, as young as 5, that they can change sex if they want to. I mean, they don't need this at their age. They're innocent. I had the blessing or misfortune to go to an all-boys school in England. And I remember one lad, he was very confused, but he changed. I mean, puberty is a huge thing you go through. And when you have parents, sadly, even in West Australia, they have a child age 14 undergoing sex change, and there's nothing the parents can do about it. I find it incredible. And yet here we have the federal government say, oh, we're protecting the kids from the internet, from misinformation, but they're giving these young minds the ability to make decisions that have life-lasting impacts, and it's irreversible. Now, recently we had the situation where they tried to stop, but there was a motion in federal parliament to stop the puberty blockers and the change of sex, as they have done in the UK with the Tavistock report. But we had 3 Liberal senators voting against it. It's crazy stuff. And then we've got, I could go on. Now, I'm getting off the subject. Education, we need to restore discipline in the schools, not beating kids, but, just kids know there's consequences. It's the same with juvenile shoplifting. They know they can get away with it scot-free and keep repeating it. There's no consequences. And the parental rights have just gone out the window. So it's like, oh, you do that to me, I'm going to report you because you're mistreating me as my rights as a child. All this nonsense. And we need teachers to have the right resources. There's a lot of special needs kids now with ADHD and other things. They've got a difficult enough job teaching a class of 30 with the paperwork. They need extra staff. I'd like to see more male teachers, good role models in the schools. We've got an issue across the world with fatherlessness, with the male role being undermined. And we want to build a fence at the top of the hill, not an ambulance at the bottom, because if kids don't have boundaries, they end up committing offences and they end up in horrible places like Banksia, which is terrible. And we can't just lock young kids away and isolation. It's inhumane. Now, there was a good juvenile facility at Wandoo before 2017 down at Rangeview, which isolated juvenile offenders from adult offenders. And they were learning life skills and they were doing well. But of course, the Labour Party came in and didn't suit their ideology. They closed it down and made it, I think it was a prison for women. That's good. But, it's almost as if they don't want schemes that succeed, whether it's Shalom House or rehabilitation programs, because we want people to come out of prison in a better way, with a different mindset. And it's not fair on prison officers that they are operating in a system that's under strain, just like the nurses operate in hospitals with a ratio that puts them under strain. And then you wonder why you can't attract people to the nursing profession, because it's just too hard. So the basics, things that we need from the state government, whether it's health, education, law and order, they're all under strain. And the function of government is to do the basics. That's what we put them there for. It's not to push some sort of Marxist agenda or big scheme, UN compliant visions. Is to do the basics and look after us.
That's right. I spoke to one of the Labor candidates because one of her great interests apparently is education, and I talked to her at length about funding that schools get, particularly for disabled students and Indigenous students, and the fact that schools need many, many more education assistants. And it struck me how little she knew about it, even though it was one of her interests. And you've spoken about, a number of issues there that are interconnected, which relate directly to our youth and small humans. Why is it, do you think, that instead of addressing the basics in education, like having enough staff and support for particular needs of students, which seems to be increasing, why do you think it is the general public aren't being more vocal about the ideologies that are being focused on in education instead of the basic necessities? Because the general public don't seem, either unaware or they're not making a noise about it. Why do you think that is?
I think many parents are just trying to pay the bills and they've got their nose to the ground. People are working longer hours now than they did 20 years ago just to survive. So if you add to that the need to keep a watchful eye on your children's education, it becomes very difficult. I'm sure that a lot of parents are concerned and interested. We've seen an increase in homeschooling. And I think there's a kind of sort of denial that this isn't really happening. The government are there to look after us, which I was brought up with many years ago. And to flip over and realise that the government aren't there really serving you, they're pushing a particular agenda, is a step that's too big for some people.
Yeah. I just want to screen the share with everybody to the Light Australian newspaper. Our current issue that we have out at the moment, issue 16, that's the cover there. We do have 2 articles in there. One written by Senator Malcolm Roberts, and that's about the increase in homeschooling, particularly in the state of Queensland. The article's not specifically about Queensland, but we've seen the greatest uptake of homeschooling in Queensland. And the second article is from Pauline herself about, trans activism and in particular the medicalisation of children. And it's a very interesting article. You mentioned Tavistock before there, Phil, and all sorts of things Pauline has tried to put through Parliament, which hasn't been supported. But go along to thelightaustralia.com and you can read it online, or you can order some copies. As I said, there's 2 great stories in there from Malcolm and Pauline. Phil, people have been asking in the comments, so I have to ask you. I'll just add to it before I ask the question. Yesterday in Warwick in Perth, we did have a pre-election forum. We had people from many different parties, candidates come along, and also sitting members who are running again for their seat, come along to speak to the good people of Perth. And we did have Mr. Caddies from One Nation there as well. It was great to hear from him, and the question was posed to him as well. So I'm going to ask you, can you make any comment about the hate speech bill that went through Parliament and Pauline abstained from voting? Can you talk to the audience about that? Because people are asking.
Yeah, it's fine. Abstentions are very common in both Parliaments, federal and state. That particular bill was run through at the last minute by Liberal and Labor. One Nation was caught on the hop. There were elements of it we supported, like limiting the funding of terrorism, stopping hatred on our streets. And there were other aspects, the suppression and censorship, that we were against. So rather than take part in a farcical debate, they chose to abstain. Mm-hmm. Abstention is not an unusual thing. I mean, Independent Sophie over here, she's abstained on emergency legislation and the electoral reform. So, but I respect Sophie as a candidate. I think she's very capable. So I don't think people should make a whole conspiracy out of this, because One Nation has always advocated for free speech. I'd refer people to Senator Malcolm Roberts' speech in Parliament in November last year regarding the influence of global billionaires to suppress free speech and BlackRock. And we've introduced bills to enshrine freedom of speech in the Constitution. And you'll find often that Malcolm will talk about the Constitution and why it's an inconvenient document. So I don't think people should get too carried away with this and theories about it. They should look at the bigger picture over 25 years of Pauline standing up for freedom of speech and freedom to choose your own medical choices.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I did a video, it's more of a commentary, I guess, not too long ago when Pauline was charged for racial vilification after replying to a tweet from Senator Faruqi. And a couple of weeks after that, we had Djokovic playing tennis, where some pretty awful things were said about him by a TV sports commentator. And I made comment that on one hand, in one circumstance, racial vilification is not on, and people as we have seen with Pauline, are charged in court, and yet it seems perfectly fine for medical vilification, because that commentator was vilifying someone based on their medical status and their choices about their own bodily autonomy. So there's a bit of a disconnect.
No, Roger Cook's perpetuated this, like Mark McGowan. Do you remember, Mark McGowan said, if you didn't take the vaccine, you were brain dead. He demonised those people. And then last week, Roger Cook was talking about the Liberal candidates and would Libby be disendorsing anti-vaxxers. Goodness me, that's hate speech. It's a very sort of form of hate speech. So there's a double standard there, as you say.
Mm-hmm.
And Novak's one of my personal heroes.
Yep. Phil, I appreciate you very much joining me this morning on a public holiday. It is a public holiday here in...
I appreciate the work of all independent media, because you kept the light shining through the COVID lockdowns, whether it was you or whichever media station was, independent media. Where would we have been without those people who were on the streets filming the 50,000 people who are allegedly only 5,000? The truth needs to shine. So thank you for the work you do, Robin, and all the other people in independent media.
Absolutely. Is there a message you'd like to leave our audience with this morning, Phil? Because don't forget, people of Western Australia, next weekend is voting weekend.
Look, I think we're going to be in some surprises on Saturday night. And I just say to people, one person can make a difference. It's happened before in history. Perth is the city of lights. Let's let the light shine this Saturday and let the truth prevail.
Fantastic. I think that sums it up very nicely. Well, I wish you a wonderful Monday. I know all the candidates are super busy at this point in time, because, as I said, we've got voting day fast approaching us. To everybody watching live, thank you for joining us. Please share the show, because I can see that I am being censored. I'm being heavily censored because I've been covering the DNA contamination since October last year, and also this election series. I have seen a dramatic increase in censorship of my shows. So please share the show if you can. All right. Thank you, Phil. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Robin. Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Have a great day. See you guys.
Strength of a woman world on her shoulders. Fight through the noise when the world gets colder. 8:32, got the brick, got the fire. Watch her rise, watch her come